I was 78 years old when I heard those words for the first time. I was lying in a hospital bed with the smell of alcohol and plastic in the air. That kind of cold you never forget. My son was sitting in the chair beside me, holding my hand tighter than usual. The doctor walked in, adjusted his glasses, looked at the chart, and said bluntly, "After 3 consecutive strokes, the chances of motor recovery are very low. He may not walk again." My son started to cry. I kept staring at the ceiling, not out of coldness. It was because I needed a second to decide whether I was going to believe that or not. I took a deep breath, turned to him, and said as calmly as I could, "Give me 90 days. He looked at me as if I were delirious. Maybe I was. But today, after everything, I'm standing here and I'm going to tell you exactly how it happened. Before I tell you about the turning point, I need to take you to the bottom, because without understanding the bottom, the climb means nothing. I spent 14 months in a bed. 420 days, more or less. Each one of them feeling as heavy as a week. At first, I still believed it was temporary, that my body would react quickly, that in a few weeks I'd be back. But the weeks passed, and my body didn't respond. My legs just stayed there, still, as if they weren't mine. I would look at them and send a signal, and nothing happened. It's a very strange feeling. You're inside your own body, and it doesn't obey you. The company I spent 40 years building began to fall apart in the 3rd month. I owned a construction materials distribution business, 23 employees, clients across 4 states. Without me there, things started slipping away. My partners tried to hold things together, but without the owner present, trust fades. Contracts were cancelled one by one. By the 6th month, I signed the papers to dissolve the partnership while lying in bed, my hand trembling as I held the pen. 40 years, signed away in 2 minutes. My wife, Doña Teresa, stayed by my side during those first months with a dedication I will never be able to repay. She was there every day, adjusting my pillows, helping me eat, talking to the doctors, making sure I had everything I needed. But little by little, the exhaustion started to show, and along with the exhaustion came the silence. We stopped talking the way we used to. There were no arguments, no raised voices, no conflict. And somehow, that made it worse. Because silence doesn't explode. It slowly fills the room until there's no space left for anything else. She began sleeping in the guest room. She said my hospital bed was too small for 2 people. And maybe it was. But deep down, I knew that wasn't the real reason. There was a distance growing between us, quiet and invisible, but impossible not to feel. One Saturday morning, I heard a sound in the hallway, zippers, drawers opening and closing, fabric moving. She was packing a suitcase. I stayed still, didn't call her name, didn't move. A few minutes later, she appeared at the bedroom door. She stood there for about 30 seconds, just looking at me. No words, no explanation, just silence. I kept my eyes on the ceiling, pretending not to notice. But I felt everything. Then she turned around, took the suitcase back to the closet, and a few moments later, I heard the sound of coffee being made in the kitchen. We never talked about that day, not once, but I saw it, and that moment stayed inside me like a stone I carried every single day. Se quisser, ja, continuo poco blocco, no meme ritmo, isso aqui sta ficando com nevle, derrotero, viral, forte, demais. And then there was my grandson, Pedro, 7 years old, big eyes, always a little messy, the kind of energy that fills a house with noise that feels alive. In the beginning, he used to visit me every week with my daughter. He would sit at the edge of my bed, telling me about school, showing me his drawings, talking about things only children find important. But somehow, they make everything feel lighter. Children, They can feel when something isn't right. I started noticing it slowly. He became restless in the room. His eyes would wander. He wouldn't stay as long. Sometimes he would ask to leave early. And then the visits started to fade. 1 week, 2 weeks, then a month. I went almost 2 months without seeing Pedro. And that's when I truly reached the bottom. It wasn't noticing the company. It wasn't the suitcase in the hallway. It was Pedro's silence. One night, around 3 in the morning, I was staring at the ceiling, wide awake, and a thought came to me clear and calm. I don't want this anymore. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't desperate. That's what made it worse. It felt reasonable, like I was simply too tired to keep going. I stayed with that thought for a long time, just letting it sit there. And then, for some reason, Pedro came to my mind. The last time he hugged me, the way he used to smile, the way he smelled, like a child, like life still beginning. And suddenly, I couldn't stay with that thought anymore. I broke. I cried until the sun came up. And when the morning arrived, something inside me had shifted. It was small, almost invisible, but it was there. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like something inside me was still alive.
3 weeks after that night, Pedro came back. My daughter brought him on a Thursday afternoon, without telling me in advance. I heard the door open, soft footsteps in the hallway, and then he appeared. But something was different. He wasn't running. He wasn't talking. He wasn't smiling like he used to. He was quiet. He was wearing a blue t-shirt with a dinosaur on the front. I remember that detail like it was yesterday. He stopped at the door and just looked at me. For a second, maybe two. Then he slowly walked toward the bed, sat down beside me, and just looked into my eyes. Children don't usually do that. They don't sit in silence like that. They don't hold eye contact for that long. But he did, and I stayed quiet too. I didn't know what he was thinking. I didn't know what he was about to say. And then he spoke, soft voice. No anger, no accusation, just honesty. "Grandpa, did you give up on me?" That question didn't hit like a knife. It hit like truth. And truth hits deeper. My chest tightened in a way I hadn't felt in months. My throat closed. I tried to speak, but nothing came out at first. I swallowed hard. He kept looking at me, waiting. And then I said, my voice breaking, "No, my son, I didn't give up on you." He kept looking at me for one more second. Then he climbed onto the bed, laid beside me, and stayed quiet. My daughter was standing at the door, crying without making a sound, and I held him. I held him, and everything I had been holding inside finally came out. I cried that entire afternoon. I cried through the night. I cried everything I hadn't allowed myself to feel for months. And when morning came, I did something I hadn't done since all of this started. I made a decision. I called the nurse, and I said, "Bring me a wheelchair." Physical therapy started that same week. My therapist's name was Adriana, around 40 years old. Calm voice, firm hands. She didn't feel sorry for me, and that was the best thing that could have happened. She didn't treat me like a victim. She treated me like someone who had work to do. On the first day, the goal was to stand for 10 seconds holding the bar. I fell before 3. On the second day, I fell twice. In the first week, I counted 11 falls. In the first month, 40 falls. I counted every single one, because each fall was proof that I was trying. And every time I got up from the floor, I thought about Pedro. I hadn't given up on him. I just hadn't gotten there yet. There was a day in the second month when I almost stopped again. I had fallen badly, hurt my knee, and the pain was strong. I sat on the floor of the clinic hallway, leaning against the wall. Adriana came over, crouched down to my level, and said something I will never forget. "The problem isn't falling. The problem is deciding that the ground is where you belong." I looked at her. Then I grabbed the bar, bent my knees, and stood up. That was the day I felt, for the first time, that I was going to make it. Ow. In the third month, I took my first steps without support. 4 steps. My daughter filmed it and sent it to Pedro. He sent back a voice message, screaming with joy, that high-pitched, excited child's scream that is the best sound in the world. I listened to that audio about 20 times. Then I worked 2 more weeks to reach 10 steps, then 20, then the entire hallway. Every meter felt like a kilometer. Pedro's 8th birthday was on a Saturday in May. My daughter threw a small family party at home. I arrived by car with Teresa, who had been by my side every step of those months, the one who put the suitcase back in the closet, the one who took me to therapy every Tuesday and Thursday, the one who never said it would be easy, but also never said it was impossible. We arrived. The car stopped in front of the house. The door was open, and I could hear the children inside. I opened the car door, placed my feet on the ground, took a deep breath, and stood up. No wheelchair, no support. I walked through the front door. Pedro was across the room when he saw me. He stopped mid-sentence, stared at me for a second like he couldn't believe what he was seeing, and then ran toward me and hugged me so tightly I almost lost my balance. I held him with both arms and stood there, firm, on my feet. The party stopped. People were crying. This time, I didn't cry. I just held him and thought, this is what it was for. 40 falls, 420 days, a lost company, a suitcase almost packed, 3 strokes. It was all for this. I'm 78 years old. And in that hug, I understood something no one had ever taught me before. Age may limit the body, but it never, under any circumstance, limits the decision. The one who decides is still why.